Today, I'm going to begin speaking about the story of Yaakov and Esav in the Torah. Now, the story of Yaakov and Esav is really very difficult to understand. There are many questions that one can ask that need solutions, and there are questions on different levels. There are questions in terms of the fact that the plain pshat is very difficult to understand. Now, the story of Yaakov and Esav basically takes place in three parshiyos in the Torah. It takes place in Bereshis, in Parshas Toldos, Parshas Vayetze, and Parshas Vayishlach. That's basically where the story of Yaakov and Esav takes place. Now, what I would like to do is I'm going to relate or review the story itself, the incidents as the Torah describes them. And as I do that, I'm going to ask questions on the particular narrative at that point. Now, in order to make it easier, I've divided the story of Yaakov and Esav basically into 5 parts. The first part is the birth and the childhood of Yaakov and Esav. The second part is the brachos of Yitzchak that he gives to Yaakov and also to Esav. Now, both of these incidents are in the Parsha of Toldos. The third part is the actual journey to go to Lavan, and also when he resides with Lavan, the actual living with Lavan. And that, of course, is in Parshas Vayetze. The fourth part is the encounter with Esav and the Malach of Esav. And the fifth part is about the Nevuah, the prophetic vision that the Rabbi Shalom gives him in Beis El. And that is, both of these, 4 and 5, are in Parshas Vayishlach. Now, basically, I'm going to concern myself with 3 different kinds of questions. The first kind of questions is that those kind of questions that indicate a difficulty in understanding the narrative or the story itself. In other words, the plain meaning of the story is very difficult to understand when we deal with the story of Yaakov and Esav. So therefore I'm going to be asking questions which deal with this kind of type. The difficulties itself that the narrative displays. The second kind of question is those kind of expressions or words which are in the Torah, which really seem rather innocent and innocuous, and to try to reveal profound concepts in them, to show that even when the Torah does indicate a word that seems to be part of the narrative and doesn't have to really have any special meaning by itself, that the truth is that these words have very profound ideas in them, and they reveal very great seidis or secrets of the Torah. The third kind of question is the idea is that many facts which are stated by Chazal, they appear to be simple and a matter of fact like, but the truth is that they reveal many hidden meanings and many profound ideas. So I'm going to be asking questions on the third part, the third kind of question in this vein. Now, after I talk about the story, the narrative, and also the different questions that one can ask going over the narrative, I'm then going to try to reveal or talk about an internal theme, an internal plot that seems to answer all the questions, even if they be very numerous. In other words, that one can understand the expressions, what is really going on, the incidents or the events between Yaakov and Esav, by understanding the internal theme. And somehow this internal theme relates all these different kinds of questions. Then I'm going to go back and relate the story and show how each question is answered within the story based on the internal theme or plot, that internal design that is going on in the Chumash. This is what I'm going to basically be doing. Now, let us begin by looking at the Chumash itself in Parshas Toldos, and to begin the narrative. The Torah tells us, V'ele Toldos Yitzchak ben Avram, that these are the descendants or the generations of Yitzchak, who was the son of Avraham. And that Yitzchak was 40 years old when he married Rivka, and that she was barren, and if he prayed for her, and she had children. This is what the Torah begins in Parshas Toldus. Then it relates further. It says, "Vayisrei tzatzu habonim birkirbo," that the children in her contended with each other, they fought with each other. And Chazal say, interestingly enough, that what was really happening at that point was that whenever Rivka would go past a yeshiva, namely the yeshiva of Shem Ve'eva, what would happen is that the Yaakov would try to break out. He would try to be born. And when she went past an Avodah Zarah, what happened was that Esav would try to be born. So this was a constant struggle wherever she went. And this is what it's meant by Vayisrei tzatzu habonim bikirbo, that they fought within her, but what they were really fighting about is depending on where she was going, either to yeshiva or past a mokum of Avodah Zarah. Then it says, so she said, if that's the case, if I'm having so much pain, lo mazeh anoichi, then what's the whole point of wanting to become pregnant? There are many different shatim. That's a plain one. And she went to inquire from the Rebbeinu Shalom through Shem, what exactly is the meaning, why there's such tremendous pain in this particular pregnancy. So what happened is that the Rebbeinu Shalom said to her, via a Navi, which was Shem, that there are basically two great nations within you, and that from you, two great governments will split. That one government will always be mightier than the other, or one nation. In other words, that there will never be an equality among them. When one is great, the other will be small, and one is small, the other one will be greater. And that ultimately, Rav Yavoy Tzoyer, the great one, will ultimately serve the younger one. Then it says, Vayimu Yomer Loledet, that she gave birth, and Vihine, and behold, Tumim Bivitno, she had twins. So the first one came out, Admoini, he was completely red, either his complexion was red or he was red hair, and Kule Kader Seir, and he was hairy, completely like a fur coat. So she called Vayikru Shema Esav, and they called his name Esav, which means completed or finished, because he looked like an older child. Then afterwards, his brother came out, and Vyodi Echezes Ba'akev Esav, and his hand was holding the heel of Esav. And Vayikru Shema Yaakov, and his name was called Yaakov. And at that time, Yitzchak, of course, was 60 years old when he gave birth to them. Then it says, Vayigdulu Hanorim, that these two youths grew up, and that Esav was an Ish Yodei Tzayid, a man who knew trapping or hunting. He knew it very well. Ish Sodeh, a man of the field. In other words, Yodei Tzayid is his profession. Ish Sodeh is his hangout, where he was all the time, the particular environment that he always was in. Ish Sodeh, he was an outdoorsman. Yaakov Ish Tom, he was a man who was rather plain and simple. He didn't have the mind of a hunter, and he was Yeshiv Holam. He dwelled, on the contrary, in tents. And Chazal, of course, learned that, and he dwelled in tents. Now, Vayevav Yitzchak is Esav. Yitzchak loved Esav, and Rivka loved Yaakov. And it says, Ki tzayid b'piv. Why did Yitzchak love Esav? Because tzayid b'piv, there was always the hunt in his mouth. Now, then it says that after making these introductory comments, that it came one day when they were both 15 years old, that Yaakov was making a stew of red lentils, and Esav came from the field and he was very tired, exhausted. So he said to Yaakov, of course, feed me from this red stew, because I'm very tired. And Yaakov said to him, sell me your bechora, I'll give you whatever you want from these this particular stew, but I want you to sell your bechora. And Esav said to him, Hine hoilech lomos, that I'm going to die anyway, because Chazal say that on that day he killed Nimrod and his son. And Nimrod, of course, was the Nimrod that we know from the Yemois in the times, of course, of by Noach. And he was a Gibur Tzayid, Lifnei Hashem, that it says there that he was a great hunter before the Rebbeinu Shalom. So Esav killed him and his son. So he said, since anyway I killed him and they're going to come after me, what do I need Bechora for? So Yaakov said, okay, swear to me that you're going to sell it to me, and he swore to him, and therefore he sold his Bechorah. And then Yaakov, it says, gave to Esav lechem bread and nezir adoshim, and he gave him the lentils. And Esav vayochal, he ate, vayesh, he drank, vayokum, he arose, vayelach, and he went away, vayivez Esav es ha-Bechorah, and Esav despised the Bechorah. That is the first section of the Torah which begins to tell us about Yaakov and Esav. Now, when we look at this section, we begin to see that there are many, many difficult questions that one can ask. Let's begin to analyze it in that direction. First kasha we can ask, it says Vayisroitzatzu habonim birkirba, that the two children fought. That's very difficult to understand. If before Esav was born, he had such an incredible Yetzer Hara that whenever his mother Rivka walked by a Mokum Avodah Zarah, what kind of Bechira did he have? If he wasn't even born and he had such a powerful Yetzer Hara, then what chance did this individual have to be Bocher Tov? And on the contrary, the reverse, Yaakov. If he had such an incredible Yetzer Tov before he was born, so what Bechira did he have? Obviously he was going to be a tzaddik and Esav was going to be a rasha. So what's really going on? Obviously, people who have such powerful forces even before they're born, basically what kind of Bechira do they have? He already was choosing to be evil before he was born, Esav. So then why do we consider Esav as a rasha? Second kasha. The Chumash relates that they were twins. It would seem that two people who had such different natures would not be twins. So then what does it mean that they were twins? It's almost contrary to nature. Children who are usually twins have similar natures. But how can there be twins that have such dissimilar kind of natures? Also, the fact they were twins, what is the significance of the fact that they were twins in general? Okay, next kasha. Why is Toimim written without a Yud and an Aleph? Toimim is spelled Tov Aleph Vav Mem Yud Mem, Toimim, and here it's written Toimim, Tov Vav Mem Mem. It's missing the Yud and the Aleph. What is the significance of the fact that Toimim is missing two letters, a Yud and an Aleph? Another kasha. Chazal say that Yaakov was conceived first, that the Zerah Yitzchak, the first Zerah from Yitzchak was Yaakov, and Esav was second. But on coming out, Esav was first. He was the Bechor. Why does this arrangement have to be so? In other words, what is the significance of the fact that Yaakov was first, and that Esav was second in terms of conception, but in terms of being born, he was the first, he was the Bechor? What is the significance behind this particular arrangement? What are the profound ideas in this? Another kasha. Why was Yitzchak, it says that Yitzchak loved Esav and Rivka loved Yaakov. Why was Yitzchak so attractive to Esav instead of Yaakov? That's the Poshet Pshat. Why did Yitzchak like Esav so much? And it doesn't mean he liked him when he was born. Yitzchak was attractive to Esav even after they grew up, when he realized that Esav was an Ish Sodeh and he saw his particular disposition. He still was more attracted to Esav than Yaakov. The question is why? Another question we can ask. It says that Esav was Yodea Tzayed, he knew trapping, and Ish Sodeh, he was a man of the world. In other words, he was an outdoors man, a man of the field. What is meant in an internal way, in a more hidden way, what is meant by the terms Yodea Tzayed and Ish Sodeh, other than the plain meaning of the pasuk? Also by Yaakov, it says Yaakov was Yeshiva Cholam, used to dwell in tents. And Chazal tell us, of course, that it means he used to dwell in the tents of Shem Ve'ever. It means he used to learn in yeshiva all the time. But what can we really understand in a more profound way, hidden sense, of what this means about Yaakov? Also, we can ask further questions. What is the significance of the fact that Yaakov came out seizing the heel of Esav? Here he's coming out to being born, and it's a rather unusual position for one embryo or one child to go after the other child by seizing his heel. What is the significance of that? that Yaakov was seizing the heel of Esav. Another question. What is the significance, or rather, why did Yaakov want so much Esav's birthright? What did he want it so much? That he was willing, obviously he desired tremendously, and he wanted it so much that he said to Esav that I'll give you the lentils, whatever, only if you give me the bechura. In other words, he had to use this kind of extortion almost to get the bechura from Esav. Why did he want it so much? Another question. What does this? Chazal tell us that the red lentils that Yaakov was making was really the sudos from the nechama of Avram Avinu. It was the consolation suda, because Avram Avinu died that day that Esav came from the field, and Yitzchak therefore was an ovel, and the suda of red lentils Yaakov was preparing for Yitzchak to eat. This is the sudas for the nechama of the ovel. So what is significant about the fact that Esav sold his bechura on the day that Avram died, other than the plain meaning of it, that it seems to have been just a coincidence? Another question. It says that he sold it to him for cost Nizir Adoshim, and that he sat and ate it, Esav, and it says Vayochel Vayesht Vayokum Vayelach Vayivez. 4 expressions, one after the other. He ate it, he drank, he got up, he walked away, and he despised. Why does the Torah tell us this? What is the import or the hidden meaning of that kind of a statement? Another question. From Esav, or from what we see in the Torah, especially in his birth, what can we know about the essential characteristics of Esav and his descendants? In other words, how can we describe Esav essentially and be able to identify the main characteristics of Esav, and therefore the main characteristics of also of his descendants from the Torah? Because from the Torah, of course, we can see really what the primary nature of Esav is. Also, another question, Chazal say that Esav was the greatest man who ever lived in fulfilling the mitzvah of kibbud of aim. Interestingly enough. So the idea is, what is the significance of this fact other than its plain meaning? The fact that Esav was the individual who was Makayim Kibbud of Aim in an incredible way. In fact, there's a Chazal that says that when Esav used to serve his father, he used to serve him in big day malchus. He used to put on, imagine how he served his father, Yitzchak. He used to put on clothing which you would wear only on special days, and then he would come in to greet his father and ask him whatever he wanted. You can imagine the kibbud of aim that Esav did with his father. So what is the significance of the fact that he was such a mechabed, a kibbud of aim? So far we have dealt with the first phase or the section of Yaakov and Esav, and that is the birth and the childhood of both Yaakov and Esav. And we see that there are many, many difficulties in understanding what is really going on behind the narrative of Yaakov and Esav. Let us now go on to the second part, the second section, which basically deals with the brachos, the blessings that Yitzchak gave, and what was transpiring between the deception that Yaakov was trying to do and Esav, as everybody's familiar with the story. Now, just as a quick review, if you recall, it says that when Yitzchak grew old and his eyes grew dim, in other words, he was blind, and there are many pshatim on why his eyes grew dim. In any case, he called Esav and he told him that he should go out, that he's getting old and doesn't know the day of his death, and he should go out and take his weapons and, of course, hunt him some kind of venison, some kind of meat. And he should make it the way he loves it, and as a result of that, v'ochelo, and I will eat it, ba'avot v'orechacho nafshi, that my soul may bless you before I die. Rivka, of course, heard it when Yitzchak was talking to Esav, and as soon as Esav went out, she went over to Yaakov, and it says, you must immediately go and prepare 2 Gedoyim, 2 kids, not 1, 2 kids, and the reason why you have to do this, of course, is because if you don't do it now, Esav will get the brachos, and you will be out of it. And of course, Yaakov was very fearful of that, because if he finds out, he'll get cursed. So she said, don't worry about that, go out and do it. And of course, that's exactly what Yaakov did. he prepared himself and disguised himself with hairy arms and so on. And he went in front of Yaakov, and Yaakov told him, "Who are you?" And he said, "Of course, I'm Esav, your Becharecho, and that I have done what you have asked me, that your soul should bless me." And of course, Yitzchak was suspicious because he used the name of God and saying that the Rebbeinu Shalom has made the hunt go much quicker. And Esav, of course, wasn't used to using that kind of lashon. And so therefore Yaakov said, the kol is kol Yaakov, that the voice is the voice of Yaakov, v'hayadayim yidei Esav, the hands are the hands of Esav, after he felt them. Then he said, "Okay, I will bless you." He said, "Come closer," and he began. Okay, and the pasuk begins that it says, "Vayigash," and he approached him, Yaakov to Yitzchak, "Vayishak lo," and Yitzchak kissed him, and he smelled the aroma of his clothing, and he blessed him, and he said, "Re'eh, behold, reach b'ni," the smell or the aroma, the odor of my son is like the odor, the aroma of a field which God has blessed. And he then precedes him, that's the introduction, and he precedes him to give the brachos, that the Rebbeinu Shalom should give him mital hashemayim, from the dew of the heavens and from the fats of the earth, and abundant amount of grain and wine, and also that nations shall serve you, and your brother, and you shall be lord over your brother, and those that curse you will be cursed, those that bless you, of course, will be blessed. As soon as that ended, Yaakov went out, and immediately in walked Esav, of course, and Yitzchak said, "Who are you?" And he said, "Esav." And of course, at that point, Yitzchak realized what had happened, and he shook a tremendous charod gedola ad mioid. And when Esav heard what happened, of course, he let out a tremendous, great cry. And he asked for a bracha from his father, and his father says basically there's nothing you can do because he's had the brachas. But he did give him a bracha. Yitzchak did give Esav a bracha. That he told him that you should also have the fat of the land, also, and the fat of the land, and that also the dew of the heavens, and that you'll live by your sword, and that you'll serve your brother. But kashetoret, when you will grieve, when his oppression will become too great, you can throw off this yoke from off your neck, and he won't rule over you anymore. And of course it says that Yaakov hated, or rather Esav hated Yaakov, and he plotted to kill him after the days of the Avelis of his father would be over. And it was after, when his Yitzchak would die, he would then kill Yaakov. He didn't want to do it, of course, while he was alive. Of course, Rivka found out about it, and she told him, leave now until his anger becomes calm. And she sent him to Lavan in order to choose a wife. And then we find, of course, that Yaakov calls him back. Yitzchak called him back, and he again gave them some new brachas. And he told them, don't choose, of course, anybody from the Knanim, and that the Rebbeinu Shalom should bless you. And he also adds, "V'yitein lechos birchas Avram." He should give you the blessings of Avram, okay, to you, to your descendants, and to that you should inherit the land. And then Yitzchak sent Yaakov to Padan Aram, where Laban was, of course, and that's exactly where he went. Now, that is basically the second incident that we find in the Chumash concerning Yaakov and Esav. And again, we find many difficulties in this particular parsha, in this particular section. Let's see exactly what the difficulties are. First of all, Yitzchak saw that Yaakov is basically an yeshiva holam, that he dwelt in tents. In other words, that he learned Torah. And he also saw that Esav was basically an ish sodeh, that he's a man who obviously didn't learn that much, that he was obviously doing a lot of hunting and a lot of interacting with Olam Hazeh. So then why would he give the brachos to Yaakov, or rather Esav, rather than Yaakov? I mean, was Esav able to fool him even from the fact that he was an ish sodeh? It doesn't seem so, because the fact that he was an ish sodeh seemed to be very clear to everybody that they had two different dispositions. So if Yitzchak saw that one son was a Talmid Chacham, was sat and learned all day, right, and the other one was out in the woods hunting all day, who do you think would be more proper to give him the brachas of Avram? Obviously, Yaakov. So then why did Yitzchak want to give the blessings wanted to give the blessings to Esav? Also, the Torah used the expression, or rather Yitzchak says that Yodayim is Yedei Esav, the hands are the hands of Esav, and the curlers are called Yaakov. So the question is, what does Yodayim mean in terms of Esav? And what is the expression of curl, what does that really mean by Yaakov? Now, in addition, why did Yitzchak tell Esav to hunt him food before the brachas? There was plenty of game in his home. He didn't have to tell him to go and hunt. What was the point of having had Esav go out and hunt food that he should bring it back to Yitzchak, and then he will be able to give him the brachas? The question, of course, is why. Now, in addition to that, Yitzchak says in the beginning of the brachas that the odor of my son, the aroma of my son, is like the aroma of a field which the Rebbeinu Shalom has blessed. The question is, what does that statement mean? Because that's before the blessings. That's a statement of fact that he's smelling the begodim of Yaakov, and he says that the aroma from the begodim is like a field which has a beautiful aroma, a field which the Rebbeinu Shalom has blessed in terms of its beautiful produce. What is the meaning of that introduction? The pneumius of that introduction. Another question. Why is it when Yitzchak did give Yaakov the bracha, of course Yaakov was disguised as Esav, why didn't he give him the birchas Avram, which he gave him later when he was supposed to leave for Lavan's house? Why didn't he give him the birchas Avram, which he gave him when he left for Lavan's house? Why didn't he give him initially? Why didn't he give him to Yaakov initially, or rather to Esav, who he thought was Esav initially? What is the difference? Also, go further, what was the nature of the brachas that he gave Yaakov, who of course disguised himself as Esav? So we have these two questions. What was the nature of the brachas that he gave actually to Yaakov, who was disguised as Esav? And also, how do we understand the fact that when he gave Yaakov the brachas, at the end, when he was going to go to Lavan's house, like I said, he gave him the birchas Avram. The brachas of Avram was when he thought he was Esav, he did not give him the brachas of Avram. Now, another question. What is the significance? Now, it says after that, of course, Esav realized that Yaakov took his brachas, and he uttered a tremendous cry. What is the significance of that cry which he cried when Yaakov took the brachas? What does it signify, or what are the hidden meanings in that? What was the effect of the fact that Esav did cry for the brachas that Yaakov got? Now, also, Chazal say that Esav shed 3 tears. One came from the right eye and fell, one came from the left eye and fell, and one came from both and went down the middle and stayed on the nose, in the middle of the face. Didn't fall. That's what Chazal say. What does that Chazal mean? Only 3 tears, one in the right eye, one in the left eye, and one that came from both down the middle and stood midway and didn't fall. What does that mean? What is Chazal really, of course, trying to tell us? In addition, we see that Yitzchak says to Esav, when he calls him in, that he wants to give him brachas, he says, go out and hunt me food, and he says that my soul may bless you. Tvorecho nafshi, that my soul may bless you. Why didn't he just say that I may bless you? What's the idea that my soul may bless you? One can say maybe it's poetic forms or whatever, but is there any other kind of meaning besides that idea? In addition, Chazal say, the Pirkei de Rebbe Eliezer, that the brachas were given on the night of Pesach, and therefore Erev Pesach is when he told Esav to go out and hunt, and that the 2 kids, the 2 Gedoyim, that were given, that Rivka told Yaakov to give, one was the Korban Pesach, that was Korban Pesach, and the other was the korban that you had to eat, and therefore the Pesach could be eaten after, because the halacha is that the Pesach has to be nechal ala soiva. You have to eat it when you're already satiated. So the first one was the korban that would satiate you, and the second korban was the korban Pesach. That's why she told him to get 2. Okay? So the idea is, what is the illusion that is contained in these facts? Why does it have to be the night of Pesach, and one, of course, is going to be the Korban Pesach, that he's going to give the brachos over. What is meant by those ideas that Chazal say? Also, the mitzvah of Milah was not given to Esav, even though Esav observed it. And not only he observed it, but even his descendants observed it, as long as Yitzchak was alive. However, when Yitzchak was nifta, then that was the end of Milah. And they were not commanded, they were not given the mitzvah of Milah, the bris. So the question was, Esav was real, he was really a Jew, he was a complete Jew. Yishmael was from Avram, but also from Hagar. But Esav was from Rivka and Yitzchak, he was really Jewish. So then why is it that the mitzvah of Milah also was not given to him? Why was it only given to Yaakov? These are the questions that one can ask on this particular section. The next section that we find, that we talk about Yaakov and Esav, of course, is in Parshas Vayetze, when it begins talking about the journey that Yaakov has to go to Lavan, and also the actual living himself that Yaakov had, that Yaakov lived with Lavan. And it says that Vayetze Yaakov mi Beersheva, that Yaakov went out of Beersheva, Vayelech Choron, and he went to Choron. And it says that he, of course, went to a certain place because the sun had set, and he had an interesting dream. And the dream, of course, was a ladder whose bottom of the ladder was on the ground, and the head of the ladder, the top, of course, reached into the Shemayim, and that the angels of the Rebbeinu Shalom were Olim v'Yordim bo, were ascending and descending the ladder. And then it says, V'hinei Hashem nitzov olov, that the Rebbeinu Shalom was standing on Yaakov. That's one shot. And the Rebbeinu Shalom tells him that I am the God, of course, of Avram, your father, and the God of Yitzchak, and that the land that you are lying on, of course, you will get. And then he continues telling him more, and then he says, Ve'onicha v'hinei, and behold, Onechi imoch, I will be with you, ushmaticho, and I will watch you in all that you go, and I will return you to this land, and I will not desert you. And of course, Yaakov gets up, and he realizes what transpired, and then, of course, he makes a matzeva. Then Yaakov, of course, proceeds on his way to go to Lavan. And, of course, we find him coming to Lavan's house, where eventually he winds up, of course, marrying Rachel and Leah. And he gives birth, of course, to the children. And we have the contest, of course, between all the mothers, Rachel, Leah, Bilhah, and Zilpah, of course, of trying to have as many children that would be Shvatim as possible. And then it says, after everything was done, that the last child to be born, of course, was Yosef. It says that the Rebbeinu Shalom over here, Vayizkor Elokim es Rachel, that he remembered Rachel, and he heard her, and he allowed her to give birth. And she conceived, and she said, Osaf Elokim es Cherposi. The Rebbeinu Shalom has gathered, meaning he has taken away to a spot where I won't see it, es Cherposi, my humiliation. And she called his name Yosef, saying, Yosef li ben acher, the Rebbeinu Shalom should give me another child, which of course came out to be Binyamin. Then it says, Vayihi kashi yolda Rachel es Yosef. As soon as Rachel gave birth to Yosef, Yaakov said to Lavan, Shalcheni, send me away. That's when Yaakov decided to leave, when Yosef was born. And he says that, of course, and of course then we wind up in the idea that Yaakov works, of course, another 7 years for his schar, the flocks and so on, and Lavan pursues him, and he finally rids himself of Lavan, and he comes to Eretz Yisrael. Now, we could take a look at this also and ask many different questions. Why does it say that Yaakov left Beersheba and then he went to Choron? Because it seems that the fact that Yaakov left for Choron is somehow connected with the events that transpired in Beersheba. So the question is, what is, in the pneumistic fashion, what is the events that forced Yaakov to leave? Other than the simple pshat of the fact that he had to run away from Esav. That's the obvious idea. But is there something else going on that would indicate why Yaakov had to leave? Another question. Why did Yaakov have to go to Lavan at all in terms of his wives? Yitzchak never left Avram. On the contrary, it was so arranged where his wives came to him. Rivka came to him through Eliezer, the servant, right? So why couldn't it be also that the wives of Yaakov also would come that way? Why would he have to go and pursue, to go to Lavan and get his wives? Also, why is it that Yaakov left? Or rather, why is it that Yosef was born at the end? First you had all the other Shvatim, and Yosef is next to the last son before Binyamin. What significance does that have, that Yosef is born at the end of all the sons? In addition to that, why is it that as soon as Yosef is born, Yaakov decides to leave? What did Yaakov see in the birth of Yosef that it was now permissible to go back to Eretz Yisrael, and possibly even to encounter Esav? Also, Chazal say that Yosef is the sitnoi of Esav. He is the adversary of Esav, because it says in Oivadya, V'hoyo Beis Yaakov Eish, that Beis Yaakov will be a fire, Ubeis Yosef lahova, and that Beis Yosef will be the flame, Ubeis Esav lakash, and that the house of Esav as a result will be lakash, which is stubble. In other words, it will be completely destroyed. Okay. So we see that Yosef is the sitnoi shel Esav, the adversary of Esav. So the question is, why? In what way, or what power does Yosef have that he is the adversary of Esav? Now, in addition, Rachel says by Yosef's birth that Osav Hashem escher posi, that the Rebbe Shalom gathered, or he took away my humiliation. And she also says, Yosef Hashem li bein acher, that the Rebbe Shalom should give me another son. Okay, what are the hidden remozim in those two remarks? Now, to go back when he had the dream of the Sulam, why is it that the angels were going up and down? Olim v'yordim. What does that mean? Not only that, why is it that they were first going up and then they were going down? What is that supposed to indicate? That they were first going up and then they were going down. Now, another kasha. Why does it say V'hinei Hashem nitzav olav, that the Rebbe Shalom was standing on top of Yaakov? What is the... There are Meforshim that learn nitzav olav means on top of the ladder, by the ladder, but there are Meforshim that learn that it means nitzav olav, and that's really what Pashup Pshat is. That he was standing on top of him. What does that mean? What does that signify? Also, the Rebbe Shalom goes out of his way to tell him that he will guard him, he will watch him on the way. Why does the Rebbe Shalom have to give him that promise of Shmirah, especially now? Also, the Rebbe Shalom tells him, and in you shall be blessed all the families of the earth and in your descendants. He tells him this. What is the significance of this statement that the Rebbe Shalom tells Yaakov Avinu when he was sleeping? Also, what is very strange is that the Yitzchak and Rivka both told Yaakov to go to Lavan to get a wife. Why is it that Yaakov didn't immediately go to Lavan? Because Chazal tell us that he went to learn for 14 years in the yeshiva of Shem Ve'ever before he even went to Lavan. So the question is, he obviously didn't listen to his parents to go immediately and take a wife, because he obviously wanted to learn. And his learning, of course, would take 14 years. So the question is, why did Yaakov all of a sudden feel the need to go and study now for 14 years? We know that he was an accomplished Talmud Chacham. He's been learning for years, Yeshiva Holam. Why all of a sudden would he have a need to go and learn for so many years, rather, and this was the reason, of course, why he didn't immediately go to Lavan. Why would he have this need to go and learn for so many years instead of going and to fulfill the words of his parents? Now, these are the questions on the third section. Now, the fourth section deals with the encounter of Esav and also with the Malach. And let's just take a look at that. We are now in Parshas Vayishlach, where we have the encounter with Esav and, of course, the encounter with the Malach. And briefly what it says, of course, is that Yaakov sent Malachim to Esav, his brother, to the land of Seir. And of course, he told them to tell Esav that your servant Yaakov, im Lovan Garti, I have lived with Lovan, of course, for many years, and of course, and therefore I delayed until now. And of course, he tells him, Vahili, and I have shor, I have oxen, v'chamor, shor means an ox, v'chamor means donkeys, tzoin, of course, means flock, sheep, and I have servants and maidservants and so on. And that this is what he sends, of course, to tell them to Esav. and of course they go and deliver the message to Esav. This is the first idea. It says that he of course delivered a tremendous amount of material wealth to Esav in order to placate him, that Esav of course shouldn't kill him. Then it says that he sent over the Yabok, the Ma'ava Yab, over the Yabok, the tributary of the Yabok, he sent his family, and he remained alone on the other side of that tributary. And it says, Vayivose Yaakov levadoi, Yaakov remained alone, Vayeovek ish imoy, and a man fought with him, ad alois hashocha, until the beginning of dawn. Now this particular section here is one of the most mysterious sections in all Chumash, because Chazal say that the Ish that he fought with wasn't an ordinary man. He was the Sar shel Esav, which means the guardian angel of Esav. And who is the guardian angel of Esav? The guardian angel of Esav is Samuel himself. Samuel, who is synonymous with the Malchamoves, the Satan, and the Yitzhahara. He is the chief over the entire Sitra Achra, all the forces of evil. This is who he fought with. You can imagine. And then it says, Vayar, and he beheld the Malach ki lo yocholoi, that he can't subdue him. So he touched the thigh, and he dislocated his thigh while he was fighting with him. And then he said to him, send me, because the dawn is coming up. And Vayomer, so he said, I won't send you, I should say, Kim berachtoni, unless you bless me. So the Malach says, what's your name? So he answers Yaakov. So he tells him that your name will no longer be called Yaakov, your name will now be called Yisrael. Why? Because Sariso imelokim bimanosh matuchol, you have fought, you have contended with God, and also with men, and you have won. Therefore your name is Yisrael. Therefore, and then Yaakov asks him his name, and he says, what's the point of asking my name, of course, and he blessed him there. And of course it says, Vayikro Yaakov Shem HaMokim, he called that place Peniel. Why? Because Ki Ro'isi Elokim, I have seen God, and he doesn't mean God, he means the Malach, because Malachim are also called Elokim, Ponim El Ponim, face to face, Batinotzel Nafshid, I was saved. And then it says, Vayizrach Le Hashemesh, and the sun shone upon Yaakov, as Kashe'ov, as Penuel, as Yaakov was going away from Penuel, and of course he was limping on his feet, and then the Torah says, of course, that's why we don't eat the Gid Hanosha. And then, of course, we have the idea where he actually meets Esav. Now, this parsha also is very difficult to understand. Is also very difficult to understand. And there are many questions that we can begin to ask on it. First question. It says that Yaakov, when he sends the message to Esav, he says, Im Loven Gati. Now, I live with Loven. Chazal learn that Gati is also the same oisos as Taryag, 613. So what Yaakov was really telling him is that I lived with Loven, who was such a Rasha, and even though I observed the 613 mitzvahs, this is what Chazal say. But that doesn't make sense. Why does Esav care if Yaakov lived with Lavan, observed 613 mitzvahs? He certainly wasn't observing Taryag mitzvahs. So what's gate them on, like they say? What does he care if Yaakov was observing it or not with Lavan? What's really the hidden communique that Yaakov was telling Esav? Another kasha. Yaakov tells him, I have shor v'chamor tzoin. Why does he have to enumerate, basically to Esav, what I have? Let him just say, I have a lot of possessions. Why does he enumerate shor, an ox, chamor, a donkey, tzoin, and also flock? What's again the hidden message that Yaakov is telling Esav? Also, another kasha. It says that Yaakov fought with the Sar shel Esav, which I just spoke about, and he fought with him in some way, which the Torah does not describe. There was some kind of method of contention. But the question is that why does the Sultan himself have to fight Yaakov? Why didn't he send messengers, other malachim? Why does he himself have to go and fight Yaakov? Who ubechvoidei bi'atzmoi has to go and fight Yaakov? Why? Another question. Why does the Sultan have to fight with him at all? What's the point? Besides the fact that the Sultan, of course, included in that question is the Sultan didn't fight with Avram, he didn't fight with Yitzchak. Why does he have to fight with Yaakov at all? What's the point here? Again, another question. Also, why does a Sultan have to fight now at this point in time? Not only in terms of Avraham and Yitzchak, but why now in this point in time in terms of Yaakov's life? After leaving Lavan, now he decides to fight with him. What's the profound ideas that are implied in these questions? Another question, that the Sitra Achra, which of course is a Sultan, he dislocated the thigh of Esav, or rather he dislocated the thigh of Yaakov before the dawn. Okay? He saw he couldn't win him, so he dislocated his thigh before the dawn arose. What does this signify? What does this mean? What's the implication of that? Again, Yaakov asked the Malach, the Sultan, to bless him. So what is his answer? That he says that your name will no more be Yaakov, it will be Yisrael, because you have contended with God and man, and you have won. That's not a blessing. That's merely a statement of fact. Wherein does the blessing lie that the Malach told Yaakov? Because he was merely telling him that you contended with men and with God, whatever, and therefore I will change your name to Yisrael. That's not a blessing. That is a statement of what transpired previously. So therefore, how does the Malach really bless Yaakov Avinu? In addition, it says that Vayizrach lo Hashemesh, and the sun shone upon him. What's news about that? I mean, what is the Torah telling me? Vayizrach lo Hashemesh, and the sun shone upon him. I would imagine the sun shone upon him. It shines on everybody else also. What does the Torah want to tell me with that idea? The time is up. We will continue next week. Yaakov says, or rather Yaakov calls the place Peniel. But the Torah says that when he left the place, he called it Penuel. So the question is, what is the term Penuel as the name of the Mokum? What does that indicate or signify? What are some of the profound ideas that are indicated in merely the name that Yaakov designates to a place? Now, so far we have covered 4 sections. There is one last section, of course, which is the prophecy itself, which the Rebbeinu Shalom appears to Yaakov Avinu in Beis El after he comes back from Padan Aram, after he fights with the Malach, after, of course, he meets Esav. He now comes back to Beis El, and the Rebbeinu Shalom appears to him and gives him a nevuah. This is, of course, still in Parshas Vayishlach. It says here very briefly that Vayeru Elokim el Yaakov, that the Rebbeinu Shalom appeared to Yaakov oid again in the same place, because he had appeared to him previously before he went to Lavan. Now he appears to him again. Beboy mi Padan Aram, from his coming back from Padan Aram, and he blessed him. And he told him, the Rebbeinu Shalom told him, Vayomer lo Elokim, that the Rebbeinu Shalom told him, Shimchu Yaakov lo yikore Shimchu Yaakov, that your name is Yaakov, but your name shall no longer be called Yaakov, but Yisrael will be your name. And he called his name Yisrael. So in other words, the Rabbi Shalom was confirming what the Malach who had fought with Yaakov, he was confirming that new designation. And the Rabbi Shalom tells him that I am Kel Shaddai, of course, and that you should multiply, and many kings will come out of you, and that the land which I promised Avraham and Yitzchak, of course, I will give you. And then it says, Vaya'al me'olov Elokim, that the Rabbi Shalom ascended me'olov, again, from upon him, in the place which he spoke to him. This is basically the gist of the nevuah that the Rebbeinu Shalom gave to Yaakov when he appeared to him. Now, on that we can also ask several questions. And that is, first of all, it says, why does it say Vaya'al me'olov Hashem, that the Rebbeinu Shalom ascended from Yaakov Avinu, that he was upon him and he ascended from being upon him? What does this signify? Also, we saw that it says Nitzav Olov, that the Rebbeinu Shalom was standing on him by the Sulam, and now it says, and God now ascended on him. So it says twice Olov, that the Rebbeinu Shalom was twice upon him. Once by the Sulam, where it says that the Rebbeinu Shalom was upon him by the ladder, and again later it says here that the Rebbeinu Shalom ascended from him after he finished telling him the nevuah, the prophetic vision. So the question is, what is the significance of the fact that it says Olov, that the Rebbeinu Shalom was upon him twice? Also, Another question. What does the name Yaakov and what does the name Yisrael connotate? What is the real precise understanding of the name Yaakov, his former name, and the new name that Yisrael, that the Rabbi Shalom gave him, which was also, of course, given also by the Malach? In addition, another question. Why is it that the Rabbi Shalom called Yaakov the name Yisrael at this particular point in time? Why now does Yaakov now get the name of Yisrael? Mamash at this time. Also, if Yaakov's name was changed to Yisrael, then why do we call him Yaakov? Why don't we call him Yisrael? We find by Avram that Avram's name was changed from Avram to Avraham, and we never call him Avram again. But by Yaakov, we find that even though his name was changed from Yaakov to Yisrael, then why is it that we still refer to him many times as Yaakov? Okay, to understand this particular idea. These are the questions basically which I wanted to bring out by Yaakov and Esav. What have I done so far? What have I done so far? The idea is that we have gone through the story of Yaakov and Esav briefly, and also many questions were asked. Now, if somebody kept count, there were 50 questions that were asked. That's the total amount of questions that were asked. And again, as I said before, that these questions were of three different kinds. One was the difficulty, some of the questions related to the difficulty in the narrative itself, that the plain meaning of the story was very difficult to understand. The second kind of question was that there are many expressions or words in the Torah which are innocent looking, and they don't seem to reveal anything other than the actual literary style. And the third kind of question is that Chazal many times say statements that seem to be merely a matter of fact. And the question is, of course, what are the profundities that lie in the statements of Chazal? What I would like to do, of course, is to attempt to answer all 50 questions with one internal theme or one mahalach. And hopefully that the questions themselves will be answered by this internal theme, and that will bring out what was the true internal design or the hidden story of what was transpiring between Yaakov and Esav. I mention an important idea. Now, all these different questions, 50 more or less to be exact, the idea is that many of these questions are answered, of course, by Meforshim. But the idea which I want to present is that basically the approach that is used by Meforshim is a fragmented approach. In other words, that you'll have a question and Chazal or the Meforshim will attempt to answer that question. You'll have another question, Chazal will attempt to answer that question. So therefore, what comes out is that you see a sort of a disunity among all the different questions in Yaakov and Esav, and therefore one has the feeling you don't have this flow of what's going on, the theme that answers all the questions. Therefore, even though each of these questions can be answered by different Meforshim, but it's a fragmented approach. What I am going to attempt to do is to show an internal theme, and that one internal theme will answer all these questions, which is a completely different kind of approach. So therefore, the fact that Meforshim answer it, we know that. It's the approach that is different. And what I want to demonstrate is by knowing the internal theme of the Bria, therefore one sees the harmony of all the different kinds of difficulties that presents itself. And therefore one can answer all the different questions based on this internal harmony. Now, I just wanted to briefly sum up or generalize what I'm attempting to do in terms of the method that is used in general of learning Tanakh, Chumash, Nevi'im, and Ksubim, and actually the method that is used in general to learn any Chokhmah. Now, the method that I use, I could conveniently call Tiferes, or beauty. And the idea, of course, of Tiferes is that when one sees the harmony, or that kind of a synthesis that exists among seemingly different ideas, when we can observe that kind of an integration of apparently different concepts and events or phenomena of any chokhmah, that is called tiferes, or beauty, because it is an aesthetic kind of quality to be able to unite many different things into one unifying picture. That is the method which I try to use, and that is tiferes, the method of beauty, in the sense that to always search for the internal meanings and the internal theme, and thereby uniting many things that seemingly are fragmented and disparate. Yet when the internal ideas are revealed, or the internal principles, those inner structures are revealed, then all these seemingly different kind of phenomena or events or whatever is beautifully harmonized and integrated and synthesized into one story. Now, this method can be used, of course, in any chokhmah. Now, in hashkafa, then what one seeks to do, of course, is to look for this harmony, or this true internal design of all creation. That's what hashkafa is. And hashkafa should therefore not be learned in a fragmented way of many different pshetlach or different droshes, but should be learned as a system which gives the person a united framework. And of course, this framework then unites all different kinds of separate or disparate or different events and phenomena and concepts. That's what the approach should be to hashkafa. Now, as applied to Torah, when a person uses the method of tiferes as applied to Torah, then what we try to do is to seek the internal principles, that inner design, in order to give an understanding to all halachas, or agadatot in Gemara, or midrashim, or Tanakh, in any one of these areas. When one seeks to understand them, one should not seek to understand them in separate different instances, each halacha separately, but to try to unify everything in terms of its inner meanings, its inner structure. This is the idea when you apply tiferes, learning that way, to Tanakh also. As such, one can also call tiferes by a different name called derech hayichud. Derech means a method, hayichud, the way of unity. No, it's a method of analysis that seeks to unify everything by organizing it into a system or a structure. Derech hayichud. And of course, the derech hayichud is based on the fact that the Rabbi Shalom created reality with an internal structure, an inner idea. And the method of investigation merely uncovers the true reality. So therefore, what determines the fact that one can analyze reality in this yichud idea, tiferes, unifying all things by an internal design, is because the Rabbi Shalom created reality as an intrinsic internal design, unifying everything. It's like an onion. An onion, as you peel away one layer, another layer is revealed. Reality is the same idea, that phenomena or events or ideas are not separate or distinct, but the truth is that they look that way, but when you analyze them in terms of being miyachid or unifying them, then what happens is you see the clear relationship of all reality together. And obviously the reason why the Rabbi Shalom ordered reality that way, and therefore this provides us with the justification of using this method, is because the Rabbi Shalom created reality and he based it on his oneness. That is what was supposed to be masik. Therefore, all reality, since it's based on the yichud of the Rabbi Shalom, on the oneness of God, therefore all reality must reflect a oneness in itself, and also a oneness as it is merely an expression of the yichud of the Rabbi Shalom. That is a basic generalization of the method that I try to use in approaching Tanakh. Now, last week, I had asked so far 50 questions on the parasha of Yaakov and Esav, and trying to keep true to form, I'm going to try to answer them in a method of tiferes with one idea. Now, before proceeding, however, I want to ask one more question, the 51st question. And in many ways, this particular question is really one of the most difficult to answer in all of Torah. It's really very difficult to answer. It's one of the most mysterious, actually. And it's also one of the most frequently asked when people learn the Chumash Bereshis. And also, interestingly enough, it bothers the most people. This particular question bothers people. Now you'll ask me, what is the question that is really bothersome to people and is one of the most difficult to answer in all of Chumash? and is most frequently asked? And the answer is that when you take a look at the parsha of Yaakov and Esav, there is an event that is very difficult to understand. And that is that the brachos of Yitzchak that were given to Yaakov, why did they have to come about through deceit? Why did they have to come about through this incredible deceitful ruse that Yaakov had to use, that Yaakov and Rivka both, in collaboration, had to use against Yitzchak in order to sort of fool Yitzchak in giving the brachos to Yaakov? Why? And the question assumes greater significance when we remember that Yaakov's main disposition was emes, truth. Okay? And as truth, the antithesis of truth, of course, is deceit, sheker. So here we find Yaakov engaging in an act which is completely antithetical to his entire personality, antithetical to his entire disposition, his character traits. His character traits is one of emes, truth, of always being honest, upfront, like they say, forthright. In fact, the word tam, Yaakov, ish tam, a man of tam means complete or whole, means whatever he said is what he felt. There was no deceit, there was no facade in Yaakov. Therefore, he was tomim, he was whole or complete. He wasn't echad b'peh ve'echad b'leiv, which means saying one thing with his mouth and believing another thing with his heart. He was up front. There was no facade. He related to you exactly the way he felt. So therefore, that's why he was an ish tam, a complete whole man. So therefore, if that's the case, so this entire idea or the entire event of what transpired is completely antithetical to the midah of Yaakov. So therefore, it even strengthens the question of why did this happen. And when you think of it further, it's even more difficult to understand. Because if you think about it, Esav was undeserving of the brachos for three reasons. First of all, he was a rasha, so automatically he was undeserving clearly of taking the brachos, which of course would mean the inheritance of Avram. He was a rasha, so why? Of course, he would certainly never be deserving of those brachos. The second thing is that Esav legitimately sold the bechira, the birthright. He, for whether the price that Yaakov exacted from Esav was good or bad, it was only a pot of lentil soup, red beans. The idea is that Esav agreed. And Esav swore to Yaakov, Hishovali, Yaakov says, swear to me. And Esav swore to him, and he sold him the bechira. So therefore, Esav did not deserve the bechira or the brachos, because he sold legitimately and legally his bechira. So that's another reason why Esav did not deserve the bechira. And the third reason is that there was a clear prophecy, a clear nevuah at birth, that when Rivka went to inquire of the Rabbi Shalom through Shem, the prophet Shem, of why she was having so much pain at this particular pregnancy, so the Shem answered her different statements, and one nation will be greater than another nation. But what he also said was, Rav Ya'avoitzo'ir, the older will serve the younger, which is clearly an indication that the bechira, the real blessings, of course, goes to Yaakov, not to Esav. So you have three reasons why Esav clearly did not deserve the bechira. If that's the case, why do we find this deceit being used in order to exact it from Yitzchak? Not only that, but the strange thing is that not only did Esav not deserve the bechira for three reasons, but Yitzchak could have known about this from three different sources. Either Rivka could have told him the original prophecy, or that Esav was a rasha. Yaakov certainly could have told him that Esav sold his bechira to him. And even if these two people had reasons why they didn't tell him, and they clearly did not tell Yitzchak, they kept him in the dark, the Rabbi Shalom could have told him, because the Shekhinah was always with Yitzchak. Therefore, why didn't God or the Rabbi Shalom tell him about one of these three matters, which clearly disqualifies Esav? Therefore, in terms of any of these sources, Yitzchak could have known. And maybe the biggest kasha is that even if Yaakov and Rivka did not want to tell Yitzchak about Esav, clearly the Shekhinah should have been Magala, that which was so obvious to others, Clearly the Shekhinah should have been Megaladis to Yitzchak so as not to leave Yitzchak in the dark and to have such a terrible, painful experience of being fooled, which he was. Now, we find, in addition, remember, but just to emphasize this, that here Yaakov was going to fool his father, who is an aged man, number one. Number two, he's a Novi, and he's an Ov. And what kind of son is it that can go and fool his father, given any justification? And not only that, it says, Vayechlad charod gedoyle ad mi'oid. And Chazal say that Yitzchak shook when Esav came in and said, I am the your Bechor. And Yitzchak realized what he had done. It says he shook a trembling ad mi'oid, which Chazal say that Yitzchak in his entire life was never shaken as badly as then, even when he was about to be killed by the Akedah. This era or this trembling exceeded all other years of Yitzchak, and you can imagine how great this Charod Gedolah Ad Mi'oid was. So of course the question is, why did Yaakov do it? Now, what makes it even more difficult to understand is you find that the Rabbi Shalom wanted this to happen. So the question is, where? It says Vaticheno Einav Me'Re'os, that it says, and Yitzchak grew old, Kizokin Yitzchak, and his Yitzchak became old. Vaticheno Einav Me'Re'os, and his eyesight became dimmed from seeing. So Chazal learned, and this is a Medrash Tanchuma, that the reason why Yitzchak's eyesight dimmed is that he should not be able to see Yaakov. In other words, that the Rebbeinu Shalom enabled it to happen that Yaakov should get the brachos and Yitzchak should not be able to see it. Because obviously if Yitzchak had good eyesight, this could never have happened. He could only do it because Yitzchak was basically blind. So we see clearly that the Rebbeinu Shalom was a party to the crime, if you want to call it that way, in the sense that the Rebbeinu Shalom enabled Yaakov to deceitfully use this ruse to get the brachos. So therefore we see the haskama, the approval of the Rabbi Shalom, number one, from that idea. And number two, it says in the Zohar a very strange question and answer. The Zohar asks a question. It says, how did Yitzchak not know of Esav's evil? That's incredible. How could Yitzchak not have known of the incredible riches that Esav was doing? Why? Since the Shekhinah was always by Yitzchak. And we see that the Shekhinah was by Yitzchak because Yitzchak was able to give the blessings with the Shekhinah. So therefore, the Shekhinah always was with Yitzchak. It lived with him continuously because that's how great Yitzchak was. So the question was, how could Yitzchak not have known if the Shekhinah was always by him? In other words, why didn't the Shekhinah tell Yitzchak who he should bless? And that Esav, of course, was unworthy. So the Zohar answers a very cryptic statement, very mystifying. It says that the Shekhinah did not inform Yitzchak of what happened. Why? Because the Rabbi Shalom wanted Yitzchak to give the brachos because of God's will, the knowledge of God, not Yitzchak's will or his knowledge. God purposely wanted these brachos to be given to Yaakov without Yitzchak knowing about it. And the Zohar says, V'hochi Yitztrich, and this must be. That's what the Zohar says. Why? The Zohar doesn't go into why. So therefore, we see clearly from the Zohar, from the Vatecheno Einav Me'Re'os, that the Rebbe Shalom wanted this to transpire, that Yitzchak should give the brachos to Yaakov without his knowing it. In other words, that Yaakov should initiate this disguise and through trickery, this ruse, take the brachos from Yitzchak. And of course the question is why, and this is the 51st question which I want to ask. Now, to continue. There have been many sforim or many books printed in English and so on. And I saw, interesting enough, that a noted writer and thinker, and I don't want to mention his name, he explains it in a certain way. He has a certain thesis, certain explanation, and he gives this pshat. And the reason why I mention it is to show you that you have to avoid this pshat, because it seems good, but the truth is it is the incorrect way of observing what happened between Yaakov and Esav. And he says that the Gemara Nedarim says that when the Rebbeinu Shalom told Avram because Avram was feeling very bad that he would have to send Yishmael out. So the Rebbe Hashem tells Avram, Ki bi Yitzchak yikor lecha zora, that in Yitzchak shall you have descendants. In other words, that the tradition of Avram will pass through Yitzchak and not through Yishmael. So don't worry. So the Gemara in the Durham says that it could have said Ki Yitzchak yikor lecha zora, that Yitzchak shall be called to you, your child, your offspring. Why does it say Ki bi Yitzchak, for in Yitzchak? So it answers that the Rebbe Shalom told them also that not only is Yishmael rejected, but also only part of the descendants of Yitzchak will carry on the tradition. Therefore, only Yaakov, not Esav. So you see that in that Chazal, on that pasuk, Ki bi Yitzchak yikor lecha zora, it excludes not only Yishmael, because it says Yitzchak openly, but when it says Be Yitzchak, in Yitzchak, means Be Yitzchak v'lo kol Yitzchak, in Isaac, but not all of Isaac. Means part of Isaac's descendants will not have the blessings of Avram, will not have the tradition of Avram. Therefore, the question is, or rather we see, that not only Yishmael will be excluded, but also Esav. So therefore, this individual, as a result, wants to make a statement, therefore that the tradition of Avram could only pass to only one, either Yaakov or Esav. He will admit that Esav had a chance, but it was either Yaakov or Esav. They were vying with each other. Who would get it? And of course, what did it depend on? Who was more righteous? So therefore, interestingly enough, he says that if Esav had observed the Torah and mitzvahs and had withstood the temptations and become and really been a tzaddik, then even if Yaakov had been so great morally, still Esav would have gotten it because he was greater. Of course, now that Esav, of course, did not do it, so therefore Yaakov certainly got it. But he wants to posit the idea that there was really a choice, that it can be either Yitzchak, or rather, either Yaakov or Esav. And it was really a contest between the two. And he brings down a Rambam also that says in Malachim, in Perek Yud, Halacha Zayin, that says, the Rambam talks to you about the mitzvah of Milah. Who is commanded to do the mitzvah of Milah? So the Rambam says that only Avram and his Sarai and his children, his offspring, were commanded in the mitzvah of Milah. How do we know this? Because it says, Ato v'zaracho achrecho, you and your children, your offspring, your descendants after you, which excludes clearly all other nations. That's how we know Avram as opposed to all other nations. What about Yishmael? How do we know Yishmael? Because he is a descendant or an offspring of Avram. So the Rambam says that Yishmael is excluded because it says clearly, Ki bi Yitzchak yikor lecha zora, that Yitzchak shall be your descendant, he shall carry on the tradition, and not Yishmael. So therefore Yishmael is also excluded. Therefore he is excluded, of course, from the bris milah. Now, how do we know also Esav? So the Rambam says that the reason why we know that Esav is also excluded, because he's also in the descendants of Avram, because Yitzchak clearly tells Yaakov, when he sends him away to Lavan to get a wife, V'yitin cho birchas Avram, and may God give you the blessings of Avram, which means Mechlal, which obviously indicates that he alone is the offspring or descendants of Avram, and not Esav. Now the Rambam has an interesting lashon when he describes this, and he says that Shehu levadoi Zari shel Avram, that Esav alone is the offspring of Avram. Hamachzik bedosoi, who holds on, who adheres strongly to the religion of Avram, ubedaki hayishora, and to the righteous path of Avram. Therefore, v'heim ha'mechuyav b'milah, they, the Jewish nation, who are descendants of Yaakov, they are chayav milah, the mitzvah of milah, and of course, no guy, Yishmael or Esav, are mechuyav in milah. Now, he wants to show, therefore, that why does the Rambam say this last statement, that Hamachzik, who adheres strongly to the religion and the righteous path of Avram, because that indicates that Esav also could have had it. But since Yaakov held on to the righteousness of Avram, his religion and the righteous path of Avram, therefore that's why he got it. But had Esav also held on, or rather had he held on greater than Yaakov, then he would have gotten it. This is what he wants to say concerning Yaakov and Esav, which is certainly an interesting approach. However, what this approach indicates is that there is basically a contest, a rivalry, that there was a rivalry between both Yaakov and Esav, who would have the bris of Avraham, who would have the covenant of Avraham. In other words, it comes out that both of these individuals are really contestants in a contest, that the Ribono Shel Olam would only give it to one, and each of them would have to fight it out who would be able to be the greater tzaddik. Basically, the idea is really incorrect for many reasons. Besides the fact that it rubs one wrong, that people have to fight out who is going to be in the covenant of Avraham. But in any case, there are basically several reasons why this approach is not correct. The first reason why this is basically an incorrect approach is that, wait a minute, I can understand why all the Goyim are excluded from the Bris Milah, which is the covenant itself, simply because they didn't observe the Torah, only Avraham. I can understand why Yishmael, because not only did Yishmael not observe the Torah, right, but he was born from Hagar, not from Sarah. And the Zerah Avraham obviously is only through Sarah, not through Hagar. But when you come to Esav, Esav was a Jew. He was an Ivri. His parents were Yitzchak and Rivka, who were the same parents as Yaakov. It is difficult for me to believe that Esav, initially speaking, that the covenant of Avraham would only go to one of them and not the other, because both of them were Ivrim, Jews. So therefore, why is it true that it would go to only one? Therefore, it is not logical to assume, since they were both from Rivka and Yitzchak, that the Birchas Avraham, or rather the covenant of Avraham, would only go to one. It's not logical to assume that, because they had the exact same yichus, the exact same genealogy. That is the first reason why I would reject that svara. The second reason is that it says in Malachi, one of the svarim of Tanakh, Haloi och Esav liYaakov, behold, that Esav was a brother to Yaakov, which clearly indicates that they were true equals. Not that they were equals in a contest in terms of being contestants who would win the covenant of Avraham, but they were equal initially speaking. They were both able to be in the covenant of Avraham. That's the second reason why I would reject this particular thesis. Now, in addition, you never find that the Ribono Shel Olam makes people contend amongst themselves, makes people rival among themselves for his presence or olam haba. You don't find this kind of idea, this kind of a musag, that there are contestants among nations. A man wars or rivals against himself, not against others. A person has his own purpose to fulfill. That is what the difficulty is. He has to rival himself between his Yetzirah and Yetzer Tov. If he wins, then he gets the Ribono Shel Olam, olam haba. And if he loses, of course he doesn't. That's his only other contestant, Yetzirah and Yetzer Tov. A man does not have another contestant who is going to get the covenant of Avraham if he winds up being a tzaddik. It's completely illogical, mitzad, that idea. And not only that, but you find that the Bnei Noach, before God made a covenant with Avraham, then all mankind could enter into an agreement with the Ribono Shel Olam. Did you find that if one became, the others would not? If all of them were righteous, that God would say, he'd pick and say, well, you won the contest, you were the most righteous. That's absurd. All Bnei Noach could enter into an agreement with the Ribono Shel Olam, because man does not vie with others in order to be in God's presence. He vies with himself. And it was only after Avraham that you find that they were excluded. And interestingly enough, you find that when the Ribono Shel Olam gave the Goyim, the nations of the world, another chance to enter the covenant of Avraham, by Matan Torah, the Medrash says that he went around to each nation and offered them the Torah. And had they accepted, they would have been Jews just like the Jewish nation. Had they accepted, but each one rejected it. So again you find that he went around to each nation, that this was their last chance of accepting the Torah. And had they accepted, then God would have made a covenant with them also. And they could also be a Ben Olam Haba, one who would enter an agreement to do the will of God and therefore get Olam Haba, just like the Jewish nation was. That was the last chance he gave the Goyim, the nations of the world, the Ummah Olam, and of course they refused. The Jews were the only ones, and then God forever sealed the ability of Goyim also to get Olam Haba as a nation, but he left it open as a ger, that individually they can enter into the covenant, but not as a nation. Okay? So again you find the idea that there's no such thing as a man rivaling with his brother, his own brother, to be in the presence of the Ribono Shel Olam. You rival against yourself, not against others. So therefore, I would reject this entire approach as offered by a particular individual in one of the Sfarim on Chumash. And besides that, one clearly sees in the Kabbalah, which is the pnimis of Torah, the opposite of this entire statement which was offered. That the truth is that both could have had a chance, not one, and there was a contest. Therefore, I mention this, of course, just to show you, that people have all different kinds of ideas, that this is an incorrect approach, and that one must seek another direction in order to try to understand what was going on. And interestingly enough, we have to deal with the two statements that he brought. That it says, Ki bi Yitzchak yikor lecho Zorah. The Torah clearly says that, because the Gemara says that only in Yitzchak, only some of the offspring of Yitzchak will be in the covenant of Avraham, namely Yaakov. So they see the Torah excludes Esav. The answer to that is that the Torah excludes no one. God was merely telling Avraham b'nevuah what would be, according to God's knowledge of what would be. He was telling him that eventually what will happen is there will be three exclusions. The first exclusion is of mankind, the Ummah Olam. The second exclusion is of Yishmael. And the third exclusion would be, because this is the way Esav would be boicher, okay, that eventually only Yaakov would be in the Zera Avram, or the covenant of Avram. It's a nevuah, it's a prophecy, which means that it is stated in terms of God's knowledge, not in terms of what could have been. That's number one. And the second idea of what he brings at the Rambam, that the Rambam says, Hamachzik b'dosoi u'b'darkoi hayishora, because Yaakov is the one who adhered very strongly to the religion of Avram and in his righteous path. You'll notice it doesn't say that Yaakov adhered strongly to his righteous path and to his religion more than Esav. It doesn't say Yiseh more. It says he adhered to his religion and righteous path. That's why he got the Bris Milah, which is the covenant of Avram. However, Esav did not adhere at all to this. So therefore he didn't get it. Not because he was secondary or in that contest he did worse than Yaakov. Because had he adhered, he also would have gotten, of course, the bris of Avram. So therefore, the Rambam doesn't say Ki Yosef Machzik B'Dosa U'B'Darkei Yeshora, that Yaakov more adhered strongly to the religion and the righteous path of Avram. It doesn't say that. Because the truth is, had what the individual previously had, what he said, been true, then he could have said that to Rambam. Why? Because Esav also observed mitzvahs. Esav observed mitzvahs of Milah, clearly, and also kibbud v'aim. And he also tithed salt or whatever, because that's what he told Yitzchak. Esav also observed mitzvahs, but it was nothing compared to Yaakov, of course. And Esav was basically a Rasha. So the Rambam could have said that Yaakov observed in a far greater way than Esav, therefore he gets the bris, the covenant, and not Esav. But he didn't say that. He merely says that Yaakov observed it. That's why he got it, and Esav did not observe. That's why he didn't get it. Because again, there is no such thing as a man rivaling with somebody else. He rivals against himself, between his Yetzer Hara and his Yetzer Tov. He doesn't rival with somebody else. Now, therefore, I mentioned these ideas again to say that this is not the correct approach. If that is the case, we have many questions to deal with. So then the question itself is that, what is this internal design? What is this inner theme or plot, the inner thread, that can actually unify the story? What ideas of a plot can we give that will actually answer all the questions in a certain harmony, in sort of like a harmonious gesture, in one sweep? That's the question that we're here to answer. And the answer to that lies really into what has been said the entire time. In other words, the same idea that determines all history, the same concept that determines all human events, is the exact same theme that was happening by Yaakov and Esav. Now, what have we been learning until now? If you recall, there's no difference. That story of Yaakov and Esav has to fit into the theme not only of Yaakov and Esav, it has to fit into the theme of all history, that internal theme. Then we will have achieved a true tiferes, a true harmony, because besides revealing or understanding the internal theme or plot or thread of Yaakov and Esav, thereby answering all these questions, we must also unite this with all history, and that is its true harmony. And the question, of course, is, what have I said previously, which is that theme which unifies all history, that determines all human events, that progresses? And the answer is the concept of the two Mashiachim, the Mashiach ben David and the Mashiach ben Yosef. If you recall, that these two ideas is what unites all history. It's the underlying determinant or rationale. The idea of the Mashiachim, the Mashiach ben Yosef and the Mashiach ben David. And not only obviously does this unite all history, but it's going to be the internal thread of what is going on between Yaakov and Esav. If you recall, from all the previous shurim that were given, in terms of the Mashiach ben Yosef and the Mashiach ben David, let me try to refresh your memory, because I had left it for a while, for many shurim, because I had dwelt instead on the ideas of the midas of the Rabbi Shalom, Chesed, Gvura, and Tiferes, and in terms of understanding what the Ovos had to emulate. So therefore I left the previous history. So it's very possible that people by now have forgotten that is the internal theme. So therefore I will very briefly review some of the important ideas that I had mentioned previously. Okay? Now, if you recall that the Rabbi Shalom created the universe in a certain state called Kessin. What was the deficiency, or this Kessin? The deficiency was that there was a tremendous Hesti Yechudoi. There was a matzav, a situation of the concealment of a fundamental idea of reality, and that is that the oneness of God is the ultimate reality. This was a situation in the Bria, the matzav in the Bria. And the task of Adam Rishon was to correct that, right? In other words, that Adam Rishon was supposed to masik the yichud mitziusoi. He was supposed to comprehend the idea that all reality is based on the oneness of God, and that would have meant that he would have realized that the tree, the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra, is nothing more than an illusion that God has created, even though it's physically real, but that there is no alternative direction to God's will. Only God, only His will determines reality. Why? Because of Yichud Mitziusoi. That since God is the only true thing that exists, therefore, and nothing exists independent of God, therefore Adam Rishon should have realized that the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra is not an alternative direction, or a different direction than the Rabbi Shalom's will. There is no alternative direction. And he should have realized, because God is ultimate reality, oneness of reality, as a result of that, as a result of his hasaga, his comprehension of that idea, he would have revealed or testified to the unity of God, and that would have been Gili Chudai, the revelation of the oneness of God as proclaimed by Adam Rishon, and he would have gotten Olam Haba. This was the task of Adam Rishon. Instead of Adam Rishon being masig Yechudai of the God, instead of Adam Rishon understanding the oneness of God as the fundamental, the focal principle of all reality, instead he comprehended Atzmusai, that he is also an independent being besides God, therefore he is entitled to his own will, and if he wants to eat from the tree in order to give him powers which are equal to God, which I explained a long time ago, the Midrashim, therefore he therefore came to that hasaga of Atzmusai, of his own being. As a result of that, he then gave, as a result, tremendous power to the Sitra Achra, which is the force of evil, or that being which tries to hide from man the true reality of the Bria, namely the oneness of God. He gave tremendous power to the Sitra Achra, which means that the Sitra Achra became internalized in the psyche of man. He was no more external as a snake. He now became internal. He became the Yetzer Hara inside man. And also, he gave power to the Sitra Achra to tremendously influence creation, the Bria. How? By producing a Hesti Yechudoi, a concealment of the oneness of God. In other words, by Chishech, by promoting darkness, the Sitra Achra can do it, which I'll explain. This is called Kilkul. In other words, the increased amount of concealment of God that is now in the universe was a result of Adam Rishon's Chet, and this is called Kilkul. So, before the Chet of Adam Rishon, the universe was in a situation of Chisson, merely a deficiency of the knowledge or comprehension of the oneness of God as the focal point of all reality. However, Adam with his sin increased that concealment as a direct response to his action. He increased that concealment, so now